Hey y'all, welcome to Pleiadian Point of View. I'm Peyton with Peyton Energetics, and as you have probably guessed, I'm a Pleiadian channel. So in this week's Point of View, the Pleiadians wanted to talk to us about how we can help people who are suffering. Because as lightworkers and starseeds, we are here to help. We are here to serve humanity. But we're not always sure exactly how to do that. So the guides wanted to talk to us a little bit about how we can be of service to those who are going through very, very challenging times right now, and what some of the traps are that we fall into where we as humans think we're helping, but we're actually not. So the guides are going to talk to us in this week's Point of View about how we can help the suffering. Now, the first thing the guides wanted to gently share with us is that one thing they notice about the human collective is that when we hear about people who are suffering, maybe this is a story we are seeing on the news, maybe this is someone we know who has had something very, very challenging and unfortunate that they're going through, the guides have said that they have noticed that humans tend to get angry or get into fear. And this is especially the case when it is something we see happening in the world. And as y'all know, we are moving into the era of revelation. Things cannot stay hidden anymore like they used to be able to. So what usually happens as humans when we hear someone is suffering, maybe this is something sad that we see on the news or something very alarming that's going on in the world around us, we tend to do one of two things. One is we tend to get mad, especially if it is something that we see as being unjust, unfair, people being treated poorly. We tend to get angry. Or the second thing that happens is we get into fear. We start to be afraid. So according to the guides, the way most of us respond to the suffering of others is by dropping our frequency. Now, this is a very common response that we all go through as humans when we hear something that is very, very sad, very traumatic that other people are going through, because we naturally relate at an empathetic level. We drop our vibration and we often stay in this zone of anger, this zone of fear for quite a long time. So think back to something that you have heard on the news recently that is something very, very unfortunate that is happening somewhere in the world. And one example of this is all of the natural disasters that are happening right now and the devastation that is going with that. It can just make us very easily fall into sadness, into anger and fear that why is this happening? It's not fair. And so what the guides have said is that when we start to rant about it and start to shake our fist in the air and talk about how this shouldn't happen, and we get on all of our social media platforms and we start to spread the story and our anger, and we just really stoke the fire. And so according to the guides, this is a very natural that we would have an emotional response to the suffering of others. But when we channel that energy into just ranting in anger, making other people wrong, railing against the injustice of it, we're not actually helping. So the first thing that the guides wanted us to know is that letting ourselves slip into prolonged states of anger, fear, guilt, pity is not helpful to the people who are suffering, because all we are doing is dropping our vibration for sometimes an hour or so if it's something we see on the news or hear about, or it can go on for quite a long time. If we are hearing about something that is happening in the world that is particularly unjust, and we have a lot of choices right now to look at, when we let that drag us into fear, anger, frustration, over a long period of time, where we are just spewing action and words and shaking our fist that somebody ought to do something, we're not actually helping the problem. So according to the Pleiadians, we are actually feeding the monster when we do that. because all that has happened, the way most of us process the negative things that are happening in the world around us, is by dropping our frequency for a period of time. And it can be very short. You can move through it in maybe an hour, but a lot of people get very stuck in this phase of looking around at what is happening in the world and staying in a state of fear and anger. That is actually the point of the Matrix, is to keep us in fear. That is why our mainstream outlets bombard us 24/7 with stories of fear, with this exact objective in mind, to get the people who are high vibration to drop their frequency. And the question is, are you going to accept the invitation? So when we get into these states of staying for a long period of time in these lower vibrational states, we are not being of service, because as light workers and starseeds, the way we serve those who are suffering, those who are on denser timelines, is by keeping our frequency high. Now, a couple things come up when the guides talk about this. First off, they are not encouraging us to be insensitive. They are not saying to avoid our emotions or to distract ourselves and stick our head in the sand. So they are never, ever encouraging us to be in denial. That is something that can very easily get misunderstood in the spiritual community. And they're not ever telling us not to honor our emotions. Our emotions are incredibly valuable to tell us when we are focusing on something that is in alignment with our higher self. So when we see something that is very upsetting, or we know someone who is going through something very upsetting, honoring our emotions is always a great place to start. But what the guides want us to understand is that the way that we can serve those who are suffering is by helping the processing of those emotions. So say, for example, you see on the news something terrible has happened in some part of the world. Maybe there is a war going on and people are really suffering, or a natural disaster has leveled, some country. What we can do to be of service is to help those people by processing the emotions involved. So as you watch that story, what are the themes that come up for you? Is it sorrow? Is it grief? Is it anger or hatred if we are seeing something that is unjust that is happening in the world? And again, got a lot to choose from. The way we can be of service as light workers and starseeds is by helping the collective process those dense emotions. So if it is grief that comes up when you see a news story or hear of something that has happened in the world, can you sit down then after you process your own grief and process grief for the collective? And we all know how to do this now. We have all been taught how to integrate the energies, how to process those dense emotions so that we turn it into pure source energy. Because that is how we serve the community, is by helping them process the traumas they are experiencing. Because us just getting mad about it or feeling scared of it doesn't help anyone. So that's one thing that the guides wanted us to understand, because we are very naturally going to feel and have a feeling response when we see people suffering. We want to help. Lightworkers and starseeds are healers to their very core. But staying angry for 2 weeks isn't serving the collective. All that does is take your beautiful, hard-earned high vibration as a light worker and a starseed and drops it down to a lower timeline. As long as we are resonating in fear, anger, hatred, grief, we are feeding the monster. We are contributing to the suffering in the world. And that's a little hard for us as humans to come to terms with. So the Pleiadians this week have a little bit of kind of tough love for us, but it's all intended to help us steer our natural reaction to these situations into a way that benefits ourselves by keeping us from getting stuck in a loop of low vibration. Because the more we stay in fear, the more momentum we build up around that low vibration, and the harder it is to shift out of it. That is why our mainstream sources and pretty much everything on this planet bombard us with fear messaging, because the intention is to take anyone high vibration and keep them low vibration. It's all about our frequency, all about the radio station you are tuned to. So the way the guides wanted us to understand that we can be of service to humanity is helping to process the emotions that are coming up. And these are dense emotions, y'all. These are not fun. These are ones that most of us run away from, try not to look in the eye. But this is how we serve the collective, is by helping the people who are actually experiencing these events, helping them process the trauma, helping them process the negative emotions that they are experiencing. Because when we do that, we take a big chunk of that energy out of the collective grid. So very, very important, as the guides are telling us how we can help those who are suffering. And we do that by helping them process the negative emotions, the negative feelings that are a response to what is going on. Because it is these buried feelings in all of the collective that are creating these negative manifestations to begin with. So as lightworkers and starseeds, first off, never advocating denial. So the most important thing is for us to first process our reaction to these events. So process our anger, our fear, our hatred. Some of these emotions are ones we have been taught are bad. And so part of being of service is processing our own darkness. And then as we do that, we can process that energy. Sometimes we will call this an energetic template for the entire collective. So that is what the Pleiadians wanted to share with us this week, to help us prepare to be of service. Because again, if we just let ourselves get mad, get in fear, feel sad about it, especially if it goes for an extended period of time beyond our natural human emotion. So we don't want to be robots. We're not saying ignore your feelings about this. We want to process our feelings first and then help those who are suffering process the emotions that they are going through. So that is how the Pleiadians have said we as lightworkers and starseeds can be of service to those who are suffering. And as this ascension process rolls on and the timelines continue to separate, there's going to be more and more people who could use assistance with this. So that is this week's point of view. I hope it helped you. I'll see you soon. Bye.